Hello and welcome to UnCover by Unseen Conflicts. This is a podcast series where we delve deeper into the conversations regarding the gendered aspects of conflicts, and we aim to uncover the stories and the contributions of people working in the field of gender, conflicts, and peace building. Today we have with us Ms. Aaliya Waziri. She's a renowned and accomplished advocate currently practicing in the High Court of Delhi. Aaliya has been a national consultant on intergovernmental processes and normative frameworks at the UN Women India Country Office, as well as the international consultant for women, peace and security with the UN Women Office for Timor-Leste. Today, we'll speak with her about her latest book named In the Body of a Woman. So, Aaliya, thank you so much for joining me. And I'll start by asking you, in what different ways does your book capture the persistent issues of gender and gender-based violence and the legal aspects that are attached to it?
Hi, Ayushi. Thank you so much for having me here on this podcast. The first thing that I want to say is that the landscape of violence against women is changing with the advent of technology. That is not to say that the existing or the pre-existing forms of violence that we look at, stalking, assault, groping, molestation, rape, they all exist. Acid attack, for example, they all exist. But with the advent of technology, the landscape and of course the challenges that we need to face when it comes to violence against women and girls has changed. So through my book, I have tried to encompass as many topics that I could possibly think of. Of course, there are so many more that I haven't looked at. I haven't looked at acid attack, but I have looked at cyberbullying and cyber harassment and all of those things, marital rape. Then I have, of course, looked at rape in terms of the statutory understanding of Section 376. Among a few other things, I have looked at witch hunting, which is a form of branding a woman as a witch in modern day India. Sometimes to usurp her property, sometimes to just shut down otherwise empowered women in an otherwise sexist and rural society in India.
Right. So you spoke about Section 376, I believe, just now.
Yeah.
What is that section? Would you mind telling our listeners about this?
So Section 376 is the penal provision in the Indian Penal Code. It's the provision that defines what rape is and it criminalizes the same. Now, our understanding of what the provision looks like has gone through many changes, especially after Nirbhaya, which is what I believe was a tipping point, a watershed moment in the existing framework of anti-rape laws in India. So the section that we see today in 2023 is not the same section that it was pre-Nirbhaya. And the section, of course, carves out an exception for marital rape. It says that any sort of sexual intercourse between a man and a woman will not be termed to be rape. So within the ambit of what rape is, marital rape is excluded from that. There are other scenarios that the section envisions, which is, for example, rape by person in authority or gang rape, things like that. Of course, there are 6 subsections, but just to sort of simplify, these are the broad heads under which it falls. So it talks about sex without consent, where a woman was under the false pretext of marriage, where she thought that an act, a sexual act, would lead to perhaps a marriage where she had been given false promises of marriage, so on and so forth.
So you mentioned the Nirbhaya case. Of course, there are other complexities to rape and gender-based violence, but Nirbhaya case was the one case that really shook the nerves of our nation altogether. But we still see that there is a need when it comes to, the understanding of what is to be done regarding the complexities of rape and abuse. Why do you think that exists still in our society?
The answer to that can only be found in Nirbhaya. And I've written tremendously about this, and every time I sit down to write about Nirbhaya or the changes since Nirbhaya or what has not changed since Nirbhaya, I always begin by saying, or if I'm talking to students, I begin by saying that we as women carry pain. There is an indescribable pain that hits me when I think about Nirbhaya, when I talk about Nirbhaya, when I read about Nirbhaya. It was insanity, it was brutality, it was inhumanity. At the same time, when I say women carry pain, we also carry fear of being groped, assaulted, molested, raped, fear for our safety. Ask any woman walking a street after sunset and ask her how many times she'll overlook her shoulder to see if anyone's following her. Ask any woman why she chooses to travel in the ladies' compartment in the metro bits, because she doesn't want to be groped, because she doesn't want to be followed or harassed. So, to come back to Nirbhaya, I think it would be a false statement to make if I said that nothing had changed since Nirbhaya. We have vulnerable witness deposition complexes in district courts. We have the victim compensation scheme. We have fast track courts, and which really are sort of doing the best they can in terms of expediting and addressing gender-based violence, addressing gender justice. But we have to understand that every welfare mechanism needs support infrastructure. What is more that we can do? The possibilities is endless, but off the top of my head, a victim has to support her testimony throughout in order for a prosecution to be successful. Now, we have to do our best to avoid re-victimization. How can we do that? We can start by having a gender sensitization training in place for police personnel. Because the first interaction a woman has is with the police when she goes to record her statement, when she goes to record her FIR. We can then have a training for judges, for the judiciary, for members of the legal fraternity at large, because we also need to be equipped. Sometimes defense counsels make careless statements about saying whether the victim was habituated to sex. Now, these are not things that you expect to hear, but you still do. So overall, there is need for concrete changes. Of course, I can say that there's a need for a change in mentality, but that's not so simple. We can keep talking about changing mindsets, but none of that is something we can achieve overnight or say that, okay, in 2030, we will achieve a change in mindset. We can start by having concrete steps in place. And to do that, we need a plethora of things. We also need support infrastructure. We need to have more forensic scientific laboratories that will expedite and preserve DNA samples. Right now, there are, 2, 3 in Delhi? That's it. So there is also the need for more support infrastructure to buttress a prosecution's case and reach successful convictions.
So you have mentioned in your book that there is a relation between societal superstition and female subjugation. Do you think that this contributes somewhat to the lacking in, the system where gender sensitization has still not reached to the level that it should have after all these years?
I think that it's very simple, and it's a historical reason for why these things remain overlooked. and they are not deemed of any importance, it's because gender issues are not considered worthy of time, energy, and most importantly, of resources. Till the time we don't acknowledge that something like this is happening in modern day India, we will not work towards addressing it. And how do you work towards addressing any problem? You put your money where your mouth is. You allocate funds to address the issue. If there is a problem of witch hunting, it can only be effectively tackled by the police registering FIRs. If the police refuses to do it under the influence of some village elders or the panchayat or the sarpanch or something like that, then of course there is a direct correlation between our collective societal mindset, the superstitions that churn the system, and the consequent lack of opportunities, resources, amenities available to women.
Right. When we speak about your book, when we speak about the legal experiences that you share in your book, there's also a very personal angle to it as well. You have talked about a personal experience in the book. Would you like to address what all caveats are there when it comes to cyberbullying and how the current legal system, deals with this issue?
Of course, the bully buy was a personal incident because my mother was sold off on that app, which auctioned prominent Muslim women as domestic help. But even if I keep that aside, just because it hit home is not a good enough reason for me to point out the fact that the need of the hour is to have a targeted legislation that addresses cyber violence, cyber bullying, cyber harassment against women and girls. And within the subcategory, multiple layers of identities that women wear. We could be urban, we could be rural, we could be Dalit, we could be Muslim, we could be from a metropolitan city, we could be from a tiny village. Our measure to access our access to welfare services is measured by our economic constraints. So of course, all of this goes in tandem with cheap cellular network and affordable internet connection and the ability to just go online and post nude pictures. So we have to understand that why I say we need a targeted legislation is because right now we have two statutes that deal with cyber violence, which is the Indian Penal Code and the IT Act. We have to understand that the IPC as a statute, as a piece of legislation, predates the advent of technology. Number one. Number two, the IT Act we have to understand why was the Act formulated. The Act was formulated to enhance e-commerce. It was not formulated to look at the perils of being online for a woman. So both these solutions are only stopgap measures. They're only temporary measures that are inadequate to deal with the magnitude of problems that social media, technology in general is bringing with it for women and girls.
So, what, according to you, could be done when it comes to changes in the cyberbullying laws or the IT Act? Can there be any amendments to it that can address these issues a little better?
I don't think amendment is all that is going to solve the problem. I think we need a legislation like other countries that only deals with cyber harassment and cyber violence that women face by virtue of their gender. Amendments are all well and good, but again, we're making do with the temporary solution. Society is the mirror of the fabric, is the mirror of this law. Law mirrors the societal fabric of time, and which evolves over a period, and we have to mold our laws accordingly. Only when we develop with the time and the problems that time, technology, any invention brings with it, can we have a successfully legislated society. So I don't think amendment is going to tackle the problem effectively. What we need is a permanent solution. We need a legislation that deals directly and solely with this problem.
Right. So as we come to the end of this podcast, this conversation, I would like to bring the attention back to the book. Now, this book it deals with the plethora of different issues regarding gender-based violence. What do you expect out of the readership of the book? What is the message that you want to bring forth to our listeners, to the readers of the book?
Someone once asked me when I was writing this book, what are the most significant challenges that I want to bring about? And my answer is the same. I don't know, or I don't think I can precipitate any changes in lawmaking. But through this book, I do want to generate a larger discourse on the existing problems, on some of the problems that women face. And it could be on the definition of consent in the laws penalizing rape. It could be the need for a gender sensitization curriculum in schools and higher education institutions. It could be on, of course, like I spoke about, cybercrime and cyber harassment against women. It could be on just understanding the nuances of penalizing marital rape. It can be on why we need to have a more diverse and gender responsive judiciary, why we need more women in places of in holding places of public authority and public power, why we just need to fill a void that has emerged where gender responsive literature answering loopholes within the law should have existed. So, in one sense, the book is about how do we survive in this patriarchal world. And the book answers that there is no guide, there's no manual, there's no accessible piece of literature that narrates how to. But we need to have conversations, we need to raise our voices. For those of us who are voting members of the society, we can vote for the evolving nature of women's needs vis-a-vis their respective societies, and we can bring about change. For those of us who are lawyers, for those of us who are in economics, for those of us who are into journalism, or just any member of society that thinks they want to be more informed in order to make a better choice when it comes to choosing representatives who will pick topics that the society needs.
Definitely. And I think creating a conversation, creating a dialogue is essentially the first step to bringing about the change in all these persistent issues, which is what we also aim to do over here. So thank you so much for doing this, for joining me for this podcast. And I have certainly enjoyed speaking with you about the issues that we have touched very briefly, but very importantly over this conversation. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ayushi. Thanks for having me. And I hope that Unseen Conflicts is something that reaches a lot of people and they understand why it's called Unseen Conflicts. And I hope that your tribe grows more.
Thank you so much.